In looking at the rocky soil, we have something that is not given over or dedicated to another purpose, and yet it's still not fruitful. What's the issue with the rocky soil? We're told that something springs up right away, but doesn't last.
So obviously there's no depth of soil, but it's not fit for cultivation, and it's you might look back at the garden, so to speak, and say, oh, there was this garden in there. Adam and Eve were supposed to work and keep it, but they were also supposed to push the boundaries and turn the things outside the garden into a garden-like area so that it could also be fruitful in the same fashion. And maybe it's somewhere along those lines that hasn't been turned into something that's really ready to bear fruit.
And so, if we look at this in terms of a person's life, does it ever happen that somebody joins the church, is real excited, and then that kind of withers away or peters out after a bit?
It's unfortunately super common, it can be quite a blow sometimes too, and there's just something encouraging about somebody who receives the gospel joyfully. But I think, for seasoned Christians, sometimes we temper that with a little bit like, let's just give this some time.
Right. There's it's kind of interesting because we all know Christians that have kind of been unjoyfully Christians for 30 or 40 years, and if you look at their life 30 or 40 years back, it's very similar to the way it is now. There's not a lot of growth. There's a stick-to-itiveness there, but not a lot of fruit. But then we also have, and obviously that's not what we'd hope for. But then there's also the person who comes in and hits the gospel immediately, is like all into it and doing all kinds of stuff, and you would think that would be the goal, what we're really looking for, and yet there should be some caution there. What is it about that person, their personality, their life, their character, that makes this initial devotion to the gospel not last?
It could be something. They've got a very impulsive personality, let's say. Obviously, when we think of impulsive, we often think of Peter and stuff like that, and God had to do a work in Peter before he was ready to lead the church and stuff. But unfortunately, for those who are impulsive like that, oftentimes their life revolves around novelty, and when the gospel is no longer the new thing, they'll kind of cast it aside and find the next new thing.
Okay, so this is probably something that's been repeated with other events, issues, things in their life. They're the kind of person that gets really into this thing, and then really into that thing, and then really...
Quite possibly. The Bible also alludes to the fact that, for some, though, it comes down to persecution, and they might run strong for a season, but when persecution comes, they weren't really ready for that.
So the image that we get in looking at the parable is there's a lack of depth there. What is it that creates depth? What's necessary to rectify the problem of no depth?
That's a great question. We get the analogy in the Old Testament of breaking up the fallow ground, and sometimes it's kind of breaking down some of the things that have got you into the rut that you are, and becoming teachable and malleable in a way that maybe you're ready to receive the gospel for the long haul.
There seems to be an indication of a lack of perseverance. How do we create the kind of character that has perseverance?
Suffering. It's funny because they say never pray for patience, right? And perseverance and patience go hand in hand, and they say never pray for patience because God's way of teaching often is giving you a circumstance where you can exercise patience and exercise perfect perseverance, and absolutely 100% true in my own life. I don't know that I've learned perseverance in another way. And again, you can come away with those situations and not learn the perseverance as well and bow out. But at the same time, if you're really devoted to Christ, those are opportunities.
One of the things that I find fascinating is that there seems to be, I think, a desire among people, and I don't know, I suspect it's probably not just modern people, but you see it in modern people, of this desire to do some big great thing. And yet, most of the time, when you see people who have done great things, they didn't do a great thing. They did very small things with a lot of perseverance and regularity over time, and that ended up becoming a great thing. Why is it so hard for us to learn this?
You know, it's funny because I think we just have this. There's something about aspiring to the heroic, right? You know, and unfortunately, that's usually about self-glorification and not about God glorification and stuff. But I read this really good quote from Oswald Chambers just this morning, and it was, you know, in the Christian life, it's not that we need to do the exceptional thing; it's that we need to do the ordinary things exceptionally. And I was like, wow, that's really instructive because. The truth is, you know, we sometimes feel like, oh, I can rise up to the occasion for these great things, but you know, can I do the day to day, you know, with joy and purpose?